there's no part of it that's even interesting. That's what gets you. Like, maybe, with the exception of Paul Skeens in his final push for the Cy Young, even that's not interesting. He's gonna win it. Good morning to you. Good Friday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Pirates. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or hockey, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Penguins. Cardinals 4, Pirates 1 yesterday in St. Louis. That closes out that 4-game series as a split. Braxton Ashcraft probably got the headline out of this from the Pittsburgh perspective. 5 2/3 innings. That was a season long for him. 1 run, 4 hits, a walk, 5 Ks. He's had 4 starts now where he's gotten the job done, and on each occasion, he's expanding a little bit. He's looking a little bit more confident, and he is going deeper into games. The expectation yesterday was that he'd go 5. Well, he went into the 6th. This was what Don Kelly had to say after the game to our beat writer of DK Pittsburgh Sports, Jose Negron, on the scene in St. Louis.
He's filled a lot of different roles, and then moving into the starting role here and continuing to, and today being the deepest outing that he's had, really has done a great job and stayed really consistent with his work, with his stuff, and held his stuff all the way through the start today.
Look, I don't want to be a jerk, but I get what they're talking about. And it does matter to the individual. It does matter to the organization. But it's boring. All of it's boring. When they do well, and, they did have a couple of wins in this series, it's boring. The offense in this game, all of it came from Tommy Pham, who's 38, and he hit a solo home run, and then he struck out his other 3 times up. The Pirates ended up with 5 total hits, and the opponent's boring, and the opponent had the lowest crowds in the history of that version of Busch Stadium, which was most of the discussion and debate that was going on out there during the series. And the team is now, lest we forget that the standings do still exist, 59-76, 24 whole games behind the Brewers in first place, in a market that's 2/3 the size of Pittsburgh. There are no new storylines. There are no fresh narratives. There's no firing of the manager that at least seemed to generate some legitimate storylines for a spell. Donnie getting thrown out all the time, players really standing behind him, some pushback or bounce back to the horrific start. There's none of that now. There's none of that. I mean, I'm being facetious here, but they can't even lose in enough succession to be entertaining to talk about. They've won 7 out of their past 10. They've swept the Rockies, which they should do. They've taken 2 of 3 from the Blue Jays, which they shouldn't do. I used to have a buddy who was kind of high up with one of the local TV networks, regional cable, I should say. And dude had all of the ratings, stuff you never see. Local stuff, little stuff, game-by-game stuff. And he'd occasionally share with me some tidbits like, did you know that only XXX number of people watched this game the other night? And the lowness of those numbers would floor you in some cases. Well, the reverse was also true. If you go back to 2013 and 15, Pirates were making the playoffs. The height, the spike in those figures would stun people from outside Pittsburgh. Because they'd be like, I didn't think Pittsburgh had baseball fans. Well, sure they do. They just want to see baseball. Unfortunately, that individual is no longer in that same position, so I don't have the same access to that stuff. But if I did, I can promise you right now that the ratings for these games have to be beyond brutal. I take no joy in sharing this with you. But yesterday, I was at our downtown headquarters and studio and shop, and it's a little bit of everything for us in our world. I was doing a live Steelers show that we do every day at 4 p.m. By that time, the Pirates game in St. Louis was probably about halfway through. My friends, I had no idea it was going on. None. Like, it hadn't even crossed my mind. You'd have to know my personality and my lifelong link with this franchise to know how bizarre that is. You're talking to someone who, especially when I was a lot younger, I'd be overseas visiting family. There'd be the 6-hour time difference between Serbia and Pittsburgh, and I would know everything that was going on. This is pre-internet. Like, I just found ways to constantly keep connected. And to me, that always seemed like something that a born and bred Pittsburgher like myself, that it would just come naturally for us. I didn't realize they were playing. There's a whole nother month of this left. Can you believe that? There's 27 games of this and nothing really to anticipate. Remember the days of September recalls and players that you were excited about finally getting their chance? None of that's coming. None of that. If they do bring somebody up, it's going to be somebody who was ignored for 5 months in which they were really needed. It would seem to me that if you're a team owner who's way more interested in the finances than in the sports component, this might get your attention, even if baseball itself doesn't. When we come back, J1Q.
This portion of Daily Shot of Pirates is brought to you by our friends at North Shore Tavern, that's directly across Federal Street from PNC Park. It's home of Steak on a Stone, an eating experience, underscoring the word experience. The steak is brought to you partially cooked on an 800-degree stone, and you do the rest. It's a ton of fun, it's a great meal, and it's a baseball atmosphere like no other in Pittsburgh. North Shore Tavern, right across Federal Street from PNC Park.
It's Gun Storage Check Week. Help prevent unwanted access to your firearms. No one wants their unsecured gun to be used in an accident, a suicide, or a crime. Use lockboxes, safes, and locks to secure your firearms. Learn more at gunstoragechek.org. That's gunstoragechek.org. Brought to you by NSSF, the Firearm Industry Trade Association.
Today's J1Q comes from Zach, who says, "Hey DK, my question is, whatever happened to the 3-inning save? I feel like that'd be a good way to use some of this young starting pitching next year, and this might be me being an armchair manager, and feel free to call me out if I am, but why don't the Pirates put a guy like Thomas Harrington or Jared Jones in the bullpen and deploy them when the Pirates have a 4-run or bigger lead after the 6th inning? I feel like this could be a way to limit innings for some of the younger guys and also give the guys in the bullpen a chance to work." Zach, I could tell from the avatar attached to your message, presuming that's you in the picture, that you're a young dude. And as a young dude, you're very likely not going to be familiar with the terminology Elroy Face save, at which point I will encourage you to Google up Mr. Face and his illustrious career, in particular, his one-of-a-kind performance in the 1960 World Series, in which it was he, way more than Bill Mazeroski or anybody else, and I say that with immense respect, who beat that heavily favored New York team. And the way he would do it is he would come in right around the time that you're describing. The Pirates' starting pitcher for that particular game would just kind of wear out a little bit, or more precisely, he'd get worn down by Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, Roger Maris, and along would come Face with his wicked screwball, as it was known at the time, and they had no answer for it, and Face could just go on and on and on and on with it. And rather than deploying Face as a starter or anything else, Face just became that weapon that you would turn to whenever you'd have a lead at essentially any point of the game and just say, you know what? Take it home, Elroy. Finish it out. Now, that's not how modern baseball works. This part I'm sure you do know. Everything is structured. The starter goes 5 or 6 innings, kind of the way Braxton Ashcraft did yesterday. The setup guy arrives in the 8th. The closer has the job, as well as all the music and the theatrics and the lights going down, for the 9th. In between, we'll figure it out based on matchups. Well, there are no rules governing pitcher usage that apply to what we're talking about here. There just aren't. If you want to have a game like the one that the Pirates had 2 nights ago, where Carmen Mlodzinski gets it going for whatever that was, 3 or 4 innings, Bubba Chandler comes in, gets you another 3 or 4 innings. If you still need to close it out, go ahead and summon Isaac Mattson, Dennis Santana, and get it done that way. If the strength in your organization is in your starting pitching quality and quantity, and I will remind that is the only strength of this organization, then you'd want to go with what works for you, not necessarily what works in the modern baseball template. So I like that part of it. I like the way the Pirates have utilized these guys, as I mentioned earlier this week on the show. What I don't like is the obvious. Just they can't hit. They can't hit at all. They can't hit at any level. And as such, you are almost certainly going to have to part with some of that pitching to bolster that hitting, meaning bolster it from close to 0. It would be insane to do that with this general manager, but it'll probably be the only path moving forward once the new general manager takes over this fall. And even then, it won't be enough. You are going to have to sign a free agent or 2 or 3 who can swing the bat. And for that, you additionally need this GM to be unlike the current GM in that they can recognize hitting. You see how I did that, Zach? Like, you started off with a question that had nothing to do with Ben Cherington's inability to recognize hitting, and I took it the whole way there, like from 1960 to 2025. Boom! 65 years and multiple degrees of Kevin Bacon. I appreciate you, my man. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Pirates. We'll be back with another one of these on Monday.